going to learn today from the Zera Shimshon Parashat Chukat. In Israel, we're in Parashat Chukat. And outside of Israel, they're still lagging behind us. So outside of Israel, they're still in Parashat Korach. We're in Parashat Chukat, which I've mentioned already a couple times that these series of parashot are all on the same theme, because the book of Bereshit is the history and the creation of the world. The book of Shmot is the story of Egypt and how they go out of Egypt. The book of Vayikra is mainly laws, especially about the tabernacle and the sacrifices. And then the book of Bamidbar is exactly how it sounds. It's about what was going on in the desert. And I like calling it the soap opera of the desert. I mean, they're in the desert for 40 years. What they're doing there all day long? Must be that there's something. So when you're looking at the soap opera, what's going on the whole time in the desert? Gossiping. All the time Lashon Hara and gossiping against each other. So last week we read about Korach. The talk spoke Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu. The week before that, the spies, Shlach, they were talking Lashon Hara about Eretz Israel. Now it's Chukat. Miriam is talking Lashon Hara about Moshe. Next week is Balak and Bilam talking Lashon Hara about Israel. It's constantly Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, slandering, lying, going against each other, creating disagreements. So the theme of this week's parasha, of course, is the red heifer. And another, I would say, let's say the secondary theme of the parasha is the fact that Miriam dies. And not only that she dies, then with her death, the water supply goes out. And that's where starts the problems. Every time when something starts, then the commotion starts. So, and again, there's much more things in the parasha, but I would say that the big part of the parasha, of course, is the red heifer, which the red heifer is the source of purity. And I don't know if you heard, but they found a few red heifers in America, but recently a red heifer was born also in Israel. So a red heifer is a clear sign for the coming of the redemption, because one of the first, if not the first, sacrifice will be the red heifer. So that's already a great sign that, in case you haven't noticed, that Mashiach is around. The big part of the parasha is about the red heifer, but the death of Miriam and the running out of the water supply, this is what we're going to focus on today. Because when you're thinking about it, without water, then how do you survive, especially in the desert? But more than that, water is not only, if you're looking at the physical part of it, the spiritual part of water, water is the Torah. And when Torah runs out, how do you survive in the world without Torah? So you can look at the physical part of the fact that the water ran out, but how about the spiritual part? Besides the fact that there were 3 miracles in the desert, one in the merit of Moshe, one in the merit of Alon, and one in the merit of Miriam. We're going to go through all of it now, and then try to figure out what's going on here. So we read out of the book itself. We're going to read, in Hebrew it's called Siman. In English I would say maybe a section. So Siman Hey, in case somebody's following with the book. But nevertheless, we're going to read Hey and probably a little bit of Vav, because they're kind of connected. So it quotes as follows. In the Talmud, in Tractate Moed Katan, chapter Gimel, chapter 3, page 28, it says, Amar Rabbi Ami, Lama nismecha mitat Miriam leparasha adoma. Why is the whole parasha, the whole part on the Torah of the red heifer is right after the death of Miriam? Lomar lecha, to tell you, to teach you, ma הפרה מכפרת, אף מיתתן של צדיקים מכפרת. The same way that the red heifer atones for impurity and for sins, then the same thing is the death of a tzaddik. When a tzaddik dies, then we know this is sad for us, but a good sign, because the death of the tzaddik atones for the generation. Okay, now comes a big question. Makshim, they're asking, למה לא הסמיכה למעשה הקורבנות שהם מכפרים יותר? If you're telling me that the death of a tzaddik, a righteous person, atones, why didn't you attach it to the part in the Torah, the parasha in the Torah, that it's talking about the sacrifices? Sacrifices atone for sins even more. That's why we have sacrifices. We used to sin, now we used to bring a sacrifice. More than that, ve'od, yesh ledakdek da midrash shel Kut. Now let's look into the midrash. There's different types of midrashim. Here we're talking about the midrash that's called Yalkut Shimoni. And it says as follows, נראה שמיתת מרים הייתה קודם מעשה של מי המריבה. It seems like the death of Miriam was before the whole commotion of the water. Here in this parasha, it's called Mei Meriva, the waters of arguments, or the water of fighting. There's another situation, if you remember, we read that in Parashat Beshalach, they also fought about water. So here it's called Mei Meriva. Therefore we'll understand why it's called differently in two different places. Deita Sham, it says there in the Midrash, Ala Pasuk, on the verse, Kach et hamate, the verse says that Moshe was commanded by God, take your staff, Habe'er haya ole b'zchut Miriam, and then the well used to just come up like a convertible, opening up, but the well would come out in the merit of Miriam. I'm sure you heard about the well of Miriam. This is the name of our Women Institute, Be'er Miriam. Be'er Miriam is the well of Miriam that was giving them water in a miraculous way, because everywhere they went, the well went with them. It wasn't connected to anything. Maybe some of you are in the morning in the mikveh of the Arizal. Where's the water coming from? Nobody knows where the water is coming from. Up until now, they're trying to figure it out. Nobody knows where the water is coming from. Nevertheless, the well of Miriam was just walking around with them. Now we don't know where the well is. According to the Ari Kadosh, the well is in the Kinneret somewhere. We don't know where. The story says that when the Ari Kadosh, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, came to Tzfat, he came to his student, but then wasn't his student, but he came to Rabbi Chaim Vital, started talking to him and teaching him Kabbalah. First, of course, the story that when he came to him first, he shoot him off. Who are you? You coming to teach me? But nevertheless, Arizal opened his mouth, gave him a few gems who completely shocked him. He came and explained to him a very difficult concept in the Zohar. And the Rabbi Chaim Vital was shocked. How did you solve that? Anyways, long story short, the Arizal started teaching him, and the Rabbi Chaim Vital didn't get nothing. He was like, what is this? I'm my head of a stone. So they go on a walk, they go down to the Kinneret, they go on a boat, they start going on the boat on the water of the Kinneret. At some point they stop. The Arizal said a few holy names of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and what do you know, the well of Miriam comes out of the water. He takes a cup, puts it in the water, gives Rabbi Chaim Vital to drink one sip, and the gates of wisdom open, and that's how the story begins. So very soon, also with the coming of Mashiach, the well of Miriam is going to appear. But we know that Moshe Rabbeinu used to say a few holy names, and the Be'er would come up, and in the merit of Miriam, that's how they had water. And it says as follows, Habe'er haya ole b'zchut Miriam, the well would come in the merit of Miriam, Vatamot sham Miriam, and Miriam died over there, umiyad, velo haya mayim lada, and right away there wasn't water to the entire congregation. V'achar kach, and after that, itasham besamuch. Now it says they're also in the Midrash. For the ones who are not familiar, Midrash is more of like a historical book of events that happened in the past, but nevertheless in the Midrash is hidden many secrets and gems and so forth. So it says there on the pasuk, Hema mei meriva, these are waters of arguments and affliction and fighting. Lo tavi en ktiv kan. It doesn't say don't bring, ela lo taviu lo et velo lo ata velo et achicha velo et achotecha. It says in the Midrash, it doesn't say in the Midrash you will not bring. Rather, it says you're not going to come, your brother's not going to come, and your sister's not going to come. That's what it says in the Midrash. Who's not going to come? What is it talking about? So it says lo otcha lo et achicha velo et achotcha alin le'ar ad Yisrael. Not you, not your brother, not your sister will come to the land of Israel. So who are the three ones that it makes sense? Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. The three siblings that will not come into Eretz Israel. Miriam dies now, soon Aaron dies, and Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't go into the land of Israel. V'chen katav Rashi al pasuk, and that's what Rashi says on this verse, al mei meriva, on the waters of fighting, of argument. I Moshe chata. Now we know, okay, that Moshe sinned. I mean, the story says that he was supposed to talk to the well, and he hit the well. Okay, so Moshe sinned. Aaron and Miriam achato. What did Aaron and Miriam did? Okay, I understand the Midrash says, okay, all three of you are not going into Eretz Israel, but what did Aaron and Miriam do? And then he pulls in another Midrash, ראשית פרשת ואתחנן, the Midrash on פרשת ואתחנן, 3 פעמים הזכיר בתורה מריבה. 3 times it says in the Torah the fact there was an argument around the water. לומר, to tell us, כאן הרגתי את משה, here I killed משה, כאן הרגתי את אהרון, כאן הרגתי את מרים. Here I killed Moshe, here I killed Aaron, here I killed Miriam. If you look in the Torah, 3 times it says about the water of fighting. Why? To let us know that in 3 different places, all 3 siblings, it says haragti, means that I killed them in the desert. They're not going into Eretz Israel. Okay, so now we're left with a question. We're left with a few questions. If you're telling me that the death of Miriam is coming to atone the sin, why wasn't it said next to the parasha of the korbanot, of the sacrifices? That also atones. It's even more. More than that, what's the connection that Moshe Rabbeinu dies, Aaron and Miriam, and they all die because of that? So we have to go more to the bottom of it. Now, we have here a book that is called Zait Ra'anan. Zait Ra'anan, there's a lot of books. This is what's interesting about the teachings of the Zera Shimshon. He quotes a lot of other books, and most of these books are not really familiar and not really out there. Somebody once told me, I gave over a Dvar Torah teaching, and somebody told me, where are you bringing this from? So I quoted 3 books. He's like, I never heard of these books. I says, well, go to my bookshelf. I can guarantee to you there's 100 books you never heard of. But there's so many amazing books. We are familiar with the known ones. But don't you think in the last 1,000 years, from all around the world, there's a collection of thousands of books, of commentary from unbelievable rabbis? So, and there's these gems. I don't know if you noticed in the corner there, we just bought the new bookshelf there with all the glass shelves. There's one guy here, I don't even know where he gets it. He goes around, I think he goes around in the garbage bins, I don't even know where. He pulls out all these books that you're not going to find them in bookstores. And every time that I go to him, I look through the books, I find all these gems, these books that are off the shelves, off the market, you'll never find them. I think he goes to people, when people died, lo aleno, and he takes the Yerusha, the inheritance, he takes the books. I don't know where he gets them, it doesn't matter, but he always has all these gems. And I always have like part 1. Where's part 2? I don't know. So I have all these half series. Nevertheless, there is a book, it's called Zait Ra'anan. Zait Ra'anan is a fresh olive. This is the translation. But Zait Ra'anan was written by a rabbi called Rabbi Moshe Yehuda Leib Zilberberg from a city called Kotna. This is about 250 years, no, what am I talking about? But 150 years ago, a city in Poland, and he was a direct descendant of Yosef Karo, of the Maran, the Bet Yosef, the rabbi who wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And he has a lot of special books. One of these books is called Zait Ra'anan. Okay, commentary about the Torah, but nevertheless, it says in the Zait Ra'anan as follows. Heksha, he asked there, and he was questioning 2 midrashim, these 2 midrashim that we just read. Deha, we see, Miriam meta kodem ma'aseh hasela. Miriam died before the act that Moshe hit the rock. Vetiretz, and he explains, Desvir lahu, they understand from that, they learn from that, De'en mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. We know that in the Torah there's no sequence, there's no order in the Torah. I mean, the Torah doesn't go in order. How many times we hear a story and then jumps to a different story and then goes back to a different story? You know, where you see it in a very obvious way, it should be fresh in our mind. We just read Parashat Shlach. Moshe Rabbeinu sends spies into Eretz Israel. Before he sends them, what does it says? Vayekra Moshe leHoshea binun Yehoshua. And Moshe called Hoshea Yoshua. Now the Torah is telling me about that? Go to Sefer Shmot. It's already talking that his name is Yoshua. We never heard that Yoshua's name is Hoshea. First time in the Torah that we hear that the name of Hoshea was Hoshea and it was changed to Yoshua. Where was it? The last 2 books. And Mukdam u'Meuchar b'Torah. There's no order in the Torah. So his name was changed now, but maybe backwards we're already calling him Yoshua. One interpretation says that we already started calling him Yoshua for the fact that in the future he's going to be called Yoshua. But nevertheless, there's no order in the Torah. It doesn't mean that the parashot, they're attached to each other, that there's an order. That's what he learns from that. Hani mili, these words, betrei inyanei. But when you saying there's no order in the Torah, that's when it's talking about two different things. How many times you sit in a conversation, and women, you'll have to forgive me, and men, you'll agree with me. You talk with your wife about a certain topic, suddenly, and you know what she said? Well, who said? So-and-so. She said, that's not what we were talking about. No, I already went through this is already a different topic. Well, you did, where's the cut? So, at least, see, the men are laughing, the women are like, I'm not doing that. But nevertheless, sometimes you have a conversation and with no separation, it's already a different topic. I'm still on the previous, the women are thinking 3 steps ahead. The men are lagging like, what? And the mind is thinking of whatever it's thinking. But nevertheless, there's a delay. But happens to me many times. I'm like, wait a minute, we didn't finish the other conversation. No, we're done with that already. Same thing with the Torah. Sometimes you read a story, whoop, it cuts and it goes into a whole different story. Yeah? So it says here, when it's talking about two concepts, then there's no time. But, aval, bechad inyana, when it's talking about one topic, there isn't such a thing. Mai de mukdam mukdam, mai de muchar muchar. If it's talking about one event, there's no mess in the order. If it's talking about two events, yes, then it can jump 40 years suddenly. It can talk about one thing, whoop, and it jumps 40 years back. Okay? Kedem askinan, where do we learn that from? Perek kama de psachim, in the first chapter in the tractate Psachim. This can be found in page 7. V'ayen sham beperush Rashi. Look what Rashi gives us a reference. Go to what Rashi says. He explains how we know that when it comes to two topics, then it can jump from one date to another, and when it's one topic, it can't. Okay? Bechad inyana b'mikrot sdurot b'parasha achat al kan lashono. He's just giving us a reference. V'ken katav Baal Yavin Shmua. Now he brings another reference from a book that is called Baal Shmua. Again, like I told you, he uses very, very interesting books. And you can open up a whole library just by his reference. And when I learn, I like going to the reference because I wanna see where they're bringing it from. I remember when I started learning Hasidic philosophy, then they constantly send you through references. So what should take you an hour to learn takes you 2 days. Now go look at the reference. Now look what it says there. So it constantly starts sending you to the Zohar. Now I have to learn the Zohar. I need to see what it says in the Zohar. So sometimes it summarizes, go look over there. Okay, I want to look over there. So you get sidetracked to all the references. Here it's sending us to another book. The book is called Yavin Shmua. Yavin Shmua, the translation means he will understand a rumor. What is Yavin Shmua? This is a great rabbi, lived probably about 550 years ago. Rabbi Shimon ben Tzemach. This is his name. The last name is Diwan. Some call it Diwan. Nevertheless, it was one of the greatest families in Algeria. Up until today, the offsprings. There's a few famous rabbis, the Diwan family. Nevertheless, he was one of the greatest rabbis in Algeria, and he was a direct descendant of the Ramban. Ramban is Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. Anyways, lived about 550, 580 years ago. And he has a book. He has many books, but one of the books is Yavin Shmua. Okay. He says as follows: Bidin en mukdam u'muchar. When it comes to there's no mukdam u'muchar, there's no order, there's no sequence in the Torah. And he sends a reference over there. Again, he's just sending you to a reference. He doesn't tell you what it says in the book. He just tells you, you go do your own research. Now go find that book from 600 years ago. V'kan klonot ha'am umitat Miriam. Here, what do we have here? We have the nation complaining. And then we have the death of Miriam. U'maaseh shel mei meriva. And then we have the whole argument about the water. Hakol unyan echad. It's all one topic. The death of Miriam. The argument between everybody. All this is one topic. There's no order here. It's one topic, so it can't be mukdam u'muchar. It all has to be from the exact same time. So what do we learn from that? That Miriam died before, or did she die after? What preceded what? If she died before, then we understand how the water stopped. But if she died after, how did the water stop? Why would they fight? Do you understand what he's trying to figure out here? Because I said that many times. Most people, they read the Chumash, they read it like a book, and they zoom through it. Whoa, stop for a second. 90% of what you're reading doesn't make sense. But who stops for the questions? Rashi. Rashi's like, whoa, where are you running here? So the way to learn the Torah is, well, let's try to understand. This is not a fairy tale. How come it says that Miriam died before, but if she died before, it doesn't make sense. So we have to understand, when did she die? Before the argument or after the argument? And it will also make a big difference in what we're trying to figure out. Okay, let's continue. Ve'od, more. How can you say that the death of Miriam was after the argument of the water? Now, let me just clear out what was going on there. We don't know yet when she died, before or after, but the Torah says she died. Now, the well of Miriam stopped giving water. Now, wait a minute, we don't have water. Everybody goes to Moshe Rabbeinu, start arguing, starts a big fight, so starts a commotion. Now, when we're reading this, we're imagining three guys in the corner of the streets. This is a commotion, everybody's going against Moshe Rabbeinu. You know what it resembles in our day? When there's a protest. How do you call Hafgana? When everybody goes and stands in front of the Prime Minister's house, 5,000 people, they go to a protest. Sometimes they march in the street, 10,000 people. It becomes violent, and the police comes. Try to imagine, the desert is not a few Hebrews with a camel. You're talking about 3-4 million people living in a very small area, and when it tells there was an argument, I imagine riots. I imagine people go out to the streets, some guy pumps up the situation, and now they're all in the streets, screaming, water, water. There's not an argument between some two old guys. I mean, I constantly try to imagine how it looked. You have to imagine. I mean, we don't have movies. Steven Spielberg didn't yet go to that niche yet. But nevertheless, that's how I imagine it. I'm imagining riots. I'm imagining 50,000 people in the streets. There's no streets, but out there, screaming, burning things, kicking trash cans, I don't know what. So that's how I'm imagining it. Mei Meriva, there was an argument, there was a whole disagreement there. And then the bodyguards protecting Moshe Rabbeinu and the rest of the other people, what's going on, what should we do? I mean, they had some type of a police there. I mean, again, you have to imagine it in your mind. Nevertheless, let's go back. So it says as follows. How can you say that the death of Miriam was after the fact that there was the argument? In the merit of Miriam, they had the well. So how can you say that she died after? Doesn't make sense. Now if she's alive and they have the well, why would they complain? In the beginning, if you remember, in the book of Shmot, in Parashat Beshalach, there was also problem with the water resource. It's called in Refidim. That was a place where they had this argument. In Parashat Beshalach, in Refidim, when they were arguing about the water, Yesh lomar, one can learn from that, שעדיין לא ניתן להם הבאר. Then they still didn't have the well. They just came out of Egypt. So they had, I don't know, bottles, they had pouches. They didn't have a well yet, and then they ran out of water. That's when they started to complain. That was in a place called Refidim. Okay. עדיין לא ניתן להם הבאר, they still didn't have the well. כמו שנתלוננו על המן, כמו שניתן להם. It was the exact same thing that they ran out of food, and then they started complaining about the man. So if you go back, when they went out of Egypt, they had some type of water supply. And they also had some food. The water supply ran out, so they started complaining. But that was a good complaint. Listen, we don't have water. Then about a month after going out of Egypt, they ran out of food. So about a month after going out of Egypt, they went out of Egypt on the Tetvav in Nisan, in Tetzain, Be'iyar. 31 days later, the man came down. But they were also complaining. Listen, we're running out of food. You brought us to the desert. You have to take care of us. Okay. But after they were given the well, why would they complain? If you have the well, why are you complaining there's no water? I understand you complained before. at the time of Refidim. And again, Refidim is the location where they parked. And then they had a good reason to complain. Why? Now why are you complaining? You have the well. More than that, what the text says before that, ובפרשה זו, in this parasha, דבשביל מי מריבה לא נכנסו עצמותיה של מרים לארץ ישראל. We learn from that, from this whole argument, that the bones of Miriam didn't come into Eretz Israel. Just imagine that a lot of the bones of the people who died in the desert went into Eretz Israel, and some stayed behind. I mean, the bones of Yosef went into Eretz Israel, the bones of Miriam didn't go into Eretz Israel. The bones of Aaron, the bones of Moshe Rabbeinu. Aaron, we know where he's buried. Next to Petra, over there, we know where he's buried. There's a video online of a few young guys who crossed the border into Jordan, dressed as Arabs, and they went to the grave of Aaron HaKohen, climbed it on some mountain, and they filmed it all. They're dancing around the grave, and unbelievable. But nevertheless, the bones of Miriam, we don't know where she's buried, and they didn't go into Eretz Israel. Ve'en achinami. And of course, it's correct to say, קודם, גם זה קשה שהרי המדרש אומר, כאן הרגתי את מרים. Now this is another thing that doesn't make much sense, because it says in the Torah, כאן הרגתי את מרים. I've killed Miriam here, so how come from this whole commotion, her bones, there wasn't a proper burial? She didn't go into Eretz Israel? Okay, now let's explain a little bit. ונראה לומר, שקודם מיתת מרים התחילה באר להתעלם ולהתייבש ולהתמעט. Now everything will start making sense. It seems to say here that before the death of Miriam, the well started to slowly disappear. They couldn't find it. להתעלם, it disappeared. You know, the Midrash says, but the well went between other rocks and it disappeared. They couldn't see it. So already before the death of Miriam, the well started disappearing. Not only that, first התחילה באר להתעלם, it started disappearing, they couldn't find it. Then להתייבש, then it started to become drier and drier, there wasn't as much as water. ולהתמעט, and then it became less and less and less water. כמו שנשמתו של אדם 30 יום קודם מותו, מתחלקת להסתלק ולהתעלם. Where did we learn that from? The Zohar says 30 days before the person dies, 40 days before the person dies, they're announcing in the heavens, so and so is about to die. It's already announced. You can't change it. That's it. They put the stamp. 30 days before the person dies, every day a piece of the soul leaves the body. Slowly the soul starts, so to say, withering away. And on the day of the death, the neshama leaves the body. Moments before the person dies, the ruach leaves the body, and then the nefesh becomes very vulnerable, goes to the heart, and the person dies. That's what happens. That's what the Zohar says. So the same way that the soul slowly is withering, the well slowly started dying. Yeah. וכן מצינו במשה רבנו, and we find this about Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, in the book of Dvarim, chapter 31, לא אוכל עוד לצאת ולבוא. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can't leave anymore and I can't come anymore. And the Talmud, in Tractate Sotah, page 13, explained it. לצאת ולבוא בדברי תורה. Moshe Rabbeinu, before he died, he started blacking out. He couldn't remember what he has to say. Moshe Rabbeinu says, that's it, I can't teach anymore. Now in the Torah, this is what the verse says in the Torah. Go into chapter 31 in the book of Dvarim, this is verse 2. Moshe Rabbeinu says, לא אוכל עוד לצאת ולבוא. I can't leave and come. Nobody knows what it means. Go to the Talmud, in Tractate Sotah, it says, Moshe Rabbeinu started in the months before he died, he couldn't teach. He came to teach something, he totally forgot. He came to explain something, he didn't understand what he's about to explain. לבוא בדברי תורה, מלמד שנסתמו ממנו מעיינות החוכמה. The Talmud says, a month before Moshe Rabbeinu died, he lost his wisdom. He lost his touch. He couldn't teach anymore. והכי, דייק לשון רז"ל, and we learn from that, from what our sages have said. This can be found in Tractate Ta'anit, page 9. מתה מרים, נסתלק הבאר. Miriam died, the well disappeared. דווקא בעת מותה נסתלק. The time that she died, the באר disappeared, the well disappeared completely. אבל קודם מותה נתייבש. But before she died, the well dried. What good is a dried well? It doesn't do anything. So it disappeared completely when she died. But prior to her death, it already was dried up and it slowly diminished. Me'at or nit'alem me'at. It started slowly drying, but not only that, it disappeared. They were looking for it. Where is it? How many times happened to you that you're looking for your keys? It was here a second ago. You turned the whole house upside down. I'm telling you, I looked here 10 times. Suddenly the keys appear again. You think that happens by chance or by mistake? Same thing here. They go to get water. Where's the well? The well was here a second ago. Nope, can't find the well. That's what it means, nit'alem. Nit'alem, it disappeared. Me'at, slowly it disappeared. Velo nistalek, but it didn't completely was removed. It was here, they would see it, suddenly it disappears. Okay. וכאן במעשה זה לא נסתלק אלא שהסלע הלך וישב לו בין הסלעים. In this case, what does the Midrash says? The well was not really, when you're saying Be'er Miriam, you know what people imagine? A well, right? Like a little circle and a hole. It wasn't, it was a rock. That's the rock that Moshe Rabbeinu hit. People think that Moshe Rabbeinu hit a rock that he just went cuckoo. That was the well. It was a rock. When Arizal went to the Kinneret, a rock came out. It's not a well. You know, when we were trying to design the logo of Be'er Miriam, then all the logo makers made a well. I said, but it's not a well, it's a rock. No, but what am I going to make? That's going to be a logo, a rock. Yeah, but that's how it is. It's not a well. It's not like a circle with a hole and a bucket. So, nevertheless, the rock slowly removed, and it kind of went into the rest of the rocks, and it disappeared in the rock, in all the rocks. That's what happened. So they couldn't recognize it. It's almost like now, imagine now in this wall, one of the stones is the well. Now, whoop, it goes into the wall. I don't know which one of them. And then it comes out, like in the movies that you touch the wall and the wall moves or something. This is my imagination, but nevertheless, the rock whoop, went into the rest of the mountain and it disappeared. As it's explained very well in the Midrashim and the commentaries. וכן כתב רש"י ז"ל, and also Rashi wrote about that. And במדבר, he sends us to a reference to the book of במדבר, chapter 20. ראינו שנתעלם ולא נסתלק. So the well disappeared, but it wasn't removed, it just disappeared. Okay, now let's continue. ובשעת החטא של מי מריבה, at the time of the sin of the argument, what was the sin there? That they all went against Moshe Rabbeinu. Can you imagine the poor guy? Every 2 days they're all going against him. What do you want from me? At the time of the sin of the Mei Meriva, the waters of fighting, of affliction, en hachinami. There's no difference here. There's no contradiction here. She Miriam adayin hayta b'chaim. So Miriam was still alive at the time. Just that the well started withering. That was the problem. But she was 100%. She was still alive. Since she was about to die, then her soul started slowly diminishing. Then the well slowly started diminishing. Mishumachi, therefore, that's what it says. Vatamot sham Miriam. She was dying, but that was the moment and the day and the place that she actually died. That was the beginning of her death. Started all this problem, so that caused the death. What does our sages say? Anything that is about to be disattached, it's like disattached. How many times you go to if you have a garden and you have some fruit and you're saying this fruit is about to fall, it's already like it's disattached. But there's a saying that says, anything or anyone that is about to be disattached, it's like he's already disattached. Sometimes, unfortunately, you go to the hospital, the doctor says, we can't do anything. That's it. The person it's a matter of a week, 2 weeks, whatever. Hashem yerachem. Ve'agav, more than that, dichtiv vatamot sham Miriam, and it says in the text, Miriam died over there. Samuch, it says directly next to Ula haya mayim la'eda. It says that there was no water for the congregation. And then it says katav nami vatikaber sham, and she was buried there. Ve'ha ve'lelemichta vatamat Miriam vatikaber sham. It should have said Miriam died and she got buried there. Umau sham trei zimnei. What is sham? What is the word sham over there? That's already telling us here's a cut in the conversation. That's already two things, two topics, two completely different things. Obviously, we learned from that there was some type of a separation between these two encounters. The fact that she died, that was 30 days before the death. And then the death, that's a whole different thing, that she died. So we learn already now that she died after the argument, but just that the whale started withering slowly. Now he's asking, and if you say, if she died and the whale disappeared, how come the man didn't stop and the clouds of glory didn't stop when Aaron and Moshe died? Miriam dies, no whale. Aaron dies, they still have man. Moshe dies, they still have the clouds. What is the difference here? Let me read it again, so it will be one line. למה לא יפסקו נמי המן וענני הכבוד סמוך למיתת משה ואהרון תוך 30 יום, כמו שעשה בערב למרים? How come the cloud and the man didn't stop 30 days before the death of Aaron and Moshe, like it did with Miriam? יש לומר, we can say, שזה של מרים הוא צריך להיות כך, because it was said, some can say that in the case of Miriam, that's how it had to be. Why? כדי שיחסרו המים, that there's going to be a lack of water. Now what's going to be the result from that? What was really the result of the lack of water? יהיה ניסיון למשה. Moshe has to go through a trial. Moshe has to go through a challenge. That's one of the things we want to learn from all this. Even a Moshe Rabbeinu has nisyonot. You think you have nisyonot? You have trials? You have tests? Moshe Rabbeinu has a test. Moshe Rabbeinu is being tested here. Lack of water, now Moshe has a test. שאם היה עומד בניסיונו, you know that if Moshe would pass the test, what would be the result? אף מרים לא הייתה מתה. Forget about that he would go into Eretz Israel. Miriam wouldn't die. She would get an extension. אף על פי שהגיע זמנה למות. Even though it was already decreed and it was her time for her to die. She would get an extension and she would get more time to her life. And more than that, ועוד, שבארון לא היה יכול להיות כך. With Aaron, it couldn't be this situation. How do we know? We go to a midrash. This can be found in Midrash Rabbah. דהרי אמרינן, it says in the midrash, שאם היו ישראל יודעים שהיה עולה להר למות, לא היו מניחים אותו. The midrash says that if everybody would know that Aaron is about to die, they wouldn't let him go on the mountain. They would stop him. Everybody loved Aaron. Aaron was like the favorite for everybody. Everybody went against Moshe Rabbeinu, but Aaron everybody liked. The Midrash says if they would know that Aaron is about to die, they would stop him. Don't go up on the mountain. They didn't know why he's going on the mountain. They would stop him and they would all pray and ask him for mercy that he shouldn't die, because everybody loved him and they also knew that they get the clouds. Therefore, the death of Aaron had to be very, very quiet. They went up on the mountain, Aaron and Moshe. He went into a cave. He took his clothes off, went and lied on a bed. The angel came to take him. The Shekhinah came to take him. That's it. It had to be very quietly. Moshe met. How did Moshe Rabbeinu die? Same way. Kimitat Aaron. He also went up on the mountain quietly and disappeared. לפיכך לא נעלמו המן ועננים. Therefore, the clouds and the whale did not disappear like the whale 30 days before they died. Now, let's say the most annoying question, what if? I always teach my kids there are two questions that I don't like. What if and why? Why? You'll never get an answer. What if? That's a third grade approach. What if? The other day I heard my 4-year-old talking to the 6-year-old. What if we had the keys to the candy store? Well, we would have all the candy in the world. No, you fool, you would have all the candy in the store. It's not all the candy in the world. And you're not going to have the keys to the candy store. That's the conversation between a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. What if? So what if is a very, very irrelevant question. But what if Moshe Rabbeinu would not sin in the rock? הייתה חוזרת נשמתה למקומה. The soul of Miriam would come back to its place. Miriam wouldn't die. ולא הייתה מתה. She wouldn't die. She wouldn't die in the desert. עוד במדבר. אלא לפי שחטא משה, but since Moshe sinned, לכן נגזר עליו ועל אחיו ועל אחותו. Because he sinned was a decree on him, on his brother, and on his sister. All had a decree to die. ובזה באים כל מדרשי רז"ל הנכון. All the midrashim are all equal. They all say the same thing. Moshe Rabbeinu sinned, therefore he died, Aaron died, and Miriam died. Okay, but we're still left with a question. עדיין יש לדקדק איך אפשר שמיתת הצדיקים מכפרת. Now we go back to the original question. How could it be that the death of a tzaddik atones for my sin? והרי אדרבה, אנו רואים שבא רע לעולם. What are you telling me that it atoned? We just see worse came. Miriam dies, what happened? A whole big argument. When did it come? אחר מיתת הצדקת. Right after the death of Miriam, became even worse. שהרי מתה מרים, נסתלק הבאר ולא היה מים. Miriam died, the well disappears, they don't have any water. ואם מיתתם של צדיקים מכפרת, למה בא רע לעולם? If the death of the tzadikim, of the righteous person atones, how come it became worse? ויש לומר, we can understand from that, שהטעם הוא כנודע. The reason is, as we know, שהשפע הראוי לבוא על ידי צדיק מתמעט, כשאין הדור ראוי לכך. When does the merit disappear? When the abundance, the shefa, the energy, the right energy that is supposed to come through the tzaddik, when that diminishes, that's when the generation is not worthy. So if we're in a generation and we have a tzaddik that dies in the generation, it's us, it's not the tzaddik. Because we are sinning, we don't deserve the tzaddik, so the tzaddik slowly loses his power and he disappears. Very close to home, here in Tzfat, the Arizal came here, and when he came, everybody shoot him off. We don't like you. What do we need you? Another guy coming here with a black beard and telling us about Torah. Everybody's here with white beards, everybody here, everybody is in a very high level. Comes the Arizal, and he starts shooting for the stars. And he wasn't popular, by the way. Now he's popular. When he came here, he wasn't popular. Nobody liked him. Why? Because he made everybody look like not as great as they were. And all of that, he comes and corrects everybody. And he was young. He was only 36 years old. Can you imagine now a 36-year-old walking to a town of great sages and righteous and chachamim, big rabbis, and he starts teaching everybody? Nevertheless, the story is that nobody liked him. That he slowly he went from teaching a lot to teaching a little bit. Then there was a few people, and then he taught only one student. And then still everybody went against him. So at some point he says, I'm not wanted here. He wrapped it up. A week later he died. He says, the generation is not ready for me. That nobody is accepting what I have to say. No zchut, no merit for the generation, and he died. And only after he died, that's when they figured out, what did we do? We had the Arizal here. He could have bring Mashiach like that, but we lost it. That's what happens in every generation. But nevertheless, לכן הצדיק מסתלק מן העולם. That's why the tzaddik leaves the world, בשביל עוונות הדור, because of the sins of the generation. Now, just to take a sidetrack for a second, how many tzaddikim died in the last 20 years? We lost most of them. That just goes to show you the level of the generation. We're losing them like they're dropping like flies. All the great rabbis are just falling. Okay, that's a good sign for Mashiach, but nevertheless, it reflects on the generation. ואם הדור ירגיש בעצמו, but what happens if the generation sees, wait a minute, we're not doing that well, ויעשה תשובה, and he will do תשובה, אז מתכפר עליהם, then we get forgiven. We can be forgiven any second. I mean, I told you already, as of now, our generation is not doing such a great, we're not doing so great, by the way. There's already a gzera, there's already a decree that we're going to get it in a war. But it can be changed any second. But as of now, don't think for 1 second we're doing that great. People think that we're doing great. We're not. We're actually not doing great at all. But nevertheless, if the generation does tshuva, as mitchaper alem, then they will be atoned. Umishum hachi, my student? Umishum hachi, she's my Rabbi Shimon baby. She was born on Lag BaOmer. So I told the story many times. She's the one. I told the story that she's a reincarnation of my grandmother. So She's the one. if you heard the story. If not, I don't remember in which video I said that, but I said that many times. But nevertheless, if the generation does tshuva, then, sorry, I'm distracted. Okay, ויעשה תשובה, the generation does תשובה, אז מתכפר עליהם. Then they get atoned. ומשום הכי יאליף, that's where we... Wait. Nothing happened to me. And from that we learn, מפרה אדומה, what do we learn from the red heifer? שכשם שפרה אדומה מטהרת טומאת המת, the same way that the red heifer atones from impurity of death, כך מיתת הצדיקים מכפרת על הדור. The death of a tzaddik atones for the entire generation from the impurity of the sins they do. ומין היה לפנמי? שכשם שאפר הפרה לבדה אינה מטהרת. Now the way it works, we didn't learn it today, maybe we'll learn it throughout the week. How do they do the red heifer? They first have to slaughter it in a very specific way. Then they have to skin the cow, and they burn the entire cow. They don't use the parts of they burn it to the ground, to ashes. Then they take the ashes still doesn't do anything. You know what you need to do? You add water. You know, sometimes that's how people make dinner. How do you make it? You just add water. When I was a kid, that's how I used to make myself all these, they had these soups that you put the powder. How do? You just add water. Okay? Same thing here with the ashes of the para aduma. What do we do here? Just add water. So, the same way that the ashes of the red heifer by itself doesn't do anything. אינה מטהרת, אלא עם צירוף מים. It has to be added water to it. מים חיים, clear water. ועוד שאחר הזעה, and after the sprinkling of the water, this is not enough. The person has to go to the mikveh. צריך שיטבול את גופו, קודם שיטהר. It has to go to the mikveh. It's not that you just get sprinkled just like that. כך מיתת צדיקים מכפרת, the same way the death of the tzaddik atones, אם ירגיש בעצמו ויעשה תשובה. When is the death of the tzaddik atones? Only if you do tshuva. It's not that the tzaddik died and like, oh great, we won the lottery, the tzaddik died, we got forgiven. No, you have to do tshuva. So a lot of people think that sometimes something happened, it's almost like Yom Kippur. Some people don't do nothing on Yom Kippur and they think that they got forgiven. No, you have to do tshuva. Without the tshuva, how are you going to get forgiven? כך מיתתם של צדיקים, the death of a tzaddik atones, אם ירגיש בעצמו ויעשה תשובה. Only if you do תשובה. ועיין לעיל בפרשת אחר, he sends us to a reference in a different parasha. This is the end of the siman, the end of this section. We're going to read a very short paragraph of another siman, then we'll conclude everything. Now we're going into the next section, siman vav. ולא היה מים לעדה, and there wasn't any water to the congregation. Rashi explains, פירוש רש"י מכאן שכל 40 שנה למבר בזכות מרים. What did we learn from that? Miriam died very soon before they went into Israel. Look just now how it jumped in the Torah. We just read Shlach. We just read 40 years back. Whoop, we jumped 30 years forward. So Rashi learns from that the whole 40 years in the desert, the merit of the well was in the merit of Miriam. Now comes a question. It's hard to understand. קשה. Why does Rashi have to tell me that the whole 40 years was in the merit of Miriam? Does it make any sense that the well was not in her merit? I mean, it was obvious that even in her merit. Why do you have to explain that to me? אלא מקצת מהם. והיה לו לומר בקיצור מכאן, שעד כאן היה להם מבאר בזכות מרים. Therefore, Rashi had to clarify that the merit of the well was only in the merit of Miriam. ויש להבין, and we have to understand, the פרק הפועלים, this is going now to the Talmud, in the Tractate Baba Metzia, page 86, and it says as follows, בשכר שלושה זכו לשלושה. That's what it says in the Talmud. In the merit of 3, they got 3. Now I told you already, he just gives a reference. Now go to the Talmud, go see what it says there. So I'll save you the hassle. It says that in the merit of 3 mitzvot, 3 acts that Avraham Avinu did, they got the merit in the desert for the well, for the clouds, and for the man. What was the merit that Avraham Avinu did? When he circumcised himself right after that, has the whole story with the 3 angels that come to him. So it says as follows: the fact that he gave them, if you remember, he gave them tongues of a cow. Came 3 angels, they went and slaughtered 3 cows, 3 bulls, and he gave them a tongue. And with the mustard and whatever, there's a whole description how they did it, with butter. In the merit that he gave them that delicatessen, then they got the man. In the merit that he stood above them, vayamod alehem, that he was serving them, then they got the clouds. And in the merit that he gave them water, then they got the bear. These are the 3 acts that Avraham Avinu did. He gave them water. He washed their feet. He gave them water. So we got the well. So the Talmud says, because Avraham Avinu, we got the man, the well, and the clouds. Why are you telling me now Aaron and Moshe and Miriam? That's what the Talmud says. Vehiksha hamarsha. Comes on this a commentator. If some of you learn the Talmud, they're familiar with him. The Marsha is Rabbi Shmuel Eliezer Halevi, Eidilis, different ways how to pronounce his name. Lived about 400 years ago, a little bit less than 400 years ago. He's a very known commentary on the Talmud, and he questions that. And he says as follows: go to the Talmud, to the first chapter of the tractate Ta'anit, page 9. It says there that the man came in the merit of Moshe. Ve'abe'er, the well, b'zchut Miriam, in the merit of Miriam. And here you're telling me in this tractate that it's in the merit of Avraham Avinu? What's going on here? I mean, this is pretty common to the Talmud. In one tractate, Baba Metzia, it says it was all in the merit of Avraham Avinu. In a different tractate, Ta'anit, it says no. The man is in the merit of Moshe. The clouds in the merit of Aaron. The well, the merit of Miriam. What's going on here? Vetiretz, so he explains. דבזכות אברהם אבינו לא היו זוכים בהם אלא לפי שעה. The merit of Avraham Avinu, they got the man, the well, and the clouds. But בזכות משה, אהרון ומרים נמשכו כוח זמן כל 40 שנה. In the merit of Aaron, Moshe, and Miriam, it's sustained for 40 years. So Avraham Avinu gave them the merit to get it. But if it was only Avraham Avinu, they would get it and it would disappear. In the merit of Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, it's sustained for 40 years. Now, beautiful explanation, makes sense. ובאמת שהיינו יכולים לומר, נמי, we can say also the same, להפך, the other way around, שבזכות משה, אהרון ומרים היו זוכים בהם. One can say, wait a minute, in the merit of Moshe, Aaron and Miriam, we got the man, the well, and the clouds, לפי שעה, אבל בהצטרף זכות אברהם אבינו, זכו בהם כל 40 שנה. One can say the complete other way around, that in the merit of Aaron, Moshe, and Miriam, we got it, but in the merit of Avram, it's sustained for 40 years. Either way, משום אחי, therefore, כתב הכתוב שמיתת מרים דווקא גרמה שלא היה מים לידה. That's why the text says, because of the death of Miriam, they lost the water. זהו שרמז רש"י, that's what Rashi hinted, שלא תאמר שהיו להם הבאר בזכות אברהם. And why is that? So we're not going to say the merit is because of Avram, rather the merit is because of Miriam. אלא כל 40 שנה בזכות מרים. The whole 40 years was in the merit of Miriam. שהרי מכוח אברהם היה די שעה אחת. Because in the power of Avram, it would be only enough to be 1 hour, and then it would disappear. Okay, this little part I had to read just to connect it to the previous part. So now, let's conclude. So first of all, we have to conclude, was the death of Miriam before the fighting or after the fighting? Then the well started diminishing and diminishing and diminishing, then started the fighting, then she died. So that's where we have the historical part of it and the facts. But we want to learn something for that. It was very nice to learn some history and to go backwards and forth and what was going on there. But I like coming with a conclusion. If you come to a class and you learn the text, that's beautiful. But now I want to carry something out of the room. First thing that I want to take from it, and I said that already before, we constantly are placed with challenges, in case you haven't noticed. I told you many times, when you wake up in the morning, you don't notice that because you're too bothered to check your WhatsApp messages. But if you would sit quietly on your bed and say, Bodeh ani lefanecha, I thank you, Hashem, for giving me another opportunity, and you say that quietly and you meditate for 60 seconds. You don't have to do it for 2 hours. If you would pay attention, you would see that a little note falls next to you. And in that note, it says, what's going to be your challenge today? And it's like opening the note. Imagine just a note falling down, and you open the note. Anger. And then you put your foot down from the bed. You step on a toy. Why'd you leave the toy? Anger. But we're too much in a rush. We don't see what's the challenge of today. And you get a note. Today you're going to have to work on patience. Patience? And the second you start your day, where's my keys? Where's this? Where's that? And you start becoming impatient. But that's the challenge of the day. So we're constantly running into challenges and difficulties and tests, and I'm just giving small challenges, and I'm just doing it in a funny way. But the reality is that every day is a challenge. And we question, why me? What did I do? That's not fair. I question me. Moshe Rabbeinu was challenged. Moshe Rabbeinu! Can you imagine Moshe Rabbeinu when he's 120 years old? He's about to go into Eretz Israel. Die, kvar, enough! I had it up to here. You're still giving me another challenge? Till the last breath that you take is a challenge. So the first thing we want to take from that, don't be discouraged. You still have another many years of challenges in front of you. This challenge will be removed. The new one will come. You think you're going to knock one challenge out, that's it? You go on a vacation? No. The next one will come. So we'll take a deep breath and understand that the challenges are the ladder to get closer to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. There's a famous dream with Yaakov Avinu that he has a ladder, sulam, the feet are mutzav arza, the feet are on the ground, v'rosho magia shamayma, the head of the ladder is in the heavens. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave me a ladder in this world. Now start climbing. How do you climb the ladder? Every challenge is one step of the ladder. End the story. So also the tzaddikim have challenges. Moshe Rabbeinu has tests and challenges. Hashem is challenging Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's see if you're going to hit the rock, if you're going to talk to the rock. The guy's 120 years old. He's done. He has to retire already. He was supposed to retire 40 years ago. You're still testing him? Yeah, he's still tested. Next. We learned, what did we start? That the death of the tzaddik atones for the entire generation. We can't count on the death of the tzaddik. We can't wait for a tzaddik to die or say, oh, this tzaddik died, and say, I'm doing great. We can't count on that. We have to do tshuva. We can't count on any other interference coming from outside. I have to do tshuva. I can't count on nobody. Some people say, no, we're all together. No. You have to do tshuva for yourself. But more than that, if the tzaddik dies in the generation, and there's already, and we're saying, okay, we can be atoned for that, that's only if we do tshuva. The power of tshuva is only in our hands. And more than that, you see that Moshe Rabbeinu was a great tzaddik. What was the whole story? Very, very briefly. They're running out of water. Moshe Rabbeinu starts the whole riot. Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Hashem. What do you want me to do? He tells him, talk to the rock. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He hits the rock. Who told you to hit the rock? I told you to hit the rock. I told you to talk to the rock. Why are you hitting the rock? What was the result? The fact that you didn't sanctify my name, that's it. You're not going into Eretz Yisrael, you're going to die. This is, I know, sounds very simple, but we don't do that ourselves. Do what Hashem tells you. Don't add. Don't start making it different. No, I think. Nobody told you to think. Nobody told you to add. Nobody told you to manipulate. It says what it says. Do what it says. Why are you adding everything? How many times people, they round corners, they add things. No, I think. I didn't ask you what you think. I told you already, not too long ago we had a class, we learned about something, somebody said, I think, excuse me? I didn't ask you what you think. Oh, why are you being so rude? I'm not rude. I didn't ask you what you think. We have a book. Let's see what the book says. Why are you adding? Why are you moving? Why are you manipulating? Why are you rounding corners? Don't think. Whatever you're told, that's what you do. It's not good to use sometimes our own common sense, especially when it comes to the Torah. You do what you've been told. End of story. So when we want to conclude, we have to understand many different things, but the most that I like to understand from that is that we are pretty much equivalent to the generation of the desert. I told you already, I don't remember the source. It was many, many years ago. I don't remember where. Usually I don't like saying anything if I don't remember the source. But I remember reading it or hearing it, that that was really when I became observant, that once the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that we are the incarnation, the Gilgul of the souls of the generations of the desert. So, yeah. And when you're looking, and again, I don't remember where I read it or heard it, so that's why I don't like usually saying it, but it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense that we are, what they didn't finish, we finish. And if you're looking at the pattern, what was going on in the desert, it's kind of what's going on in our life. They started losing all their leaders. Moshe Rabbeinu dies, Miriam dies, Aaron dies, they're starting to become lost, they're walking in the desert. We are in a desert. We are in the desert of wilderness, of nothing, of challenges. So what is our key? What is our power? Is to do tshuva. I mean, our generation, in case you haven't noticed, I mean, there's a commotion. There's a what's going on here. Any second, it looks like the whole world is going down the drain. We don't have a leader. We don't have a leader in our generation. There's great rabbis, but we don't have a leader. It means any second Mashiach is going to come. Now, how is Mashiach coming? Is he coming in a disaster, or is he coming b'chesed v'rachamim, with mercy and kindness? So it depends on us. It depends on my tshuva. I can't throw it on other people. I have to do it. And you don't have to be the chief rabbi of the world. You have to do tshuva. You have to look around what you're doing. Because right now we're hanging by a string. Any second, the disaster can happen. You know, again, after many times, again, the Israeli IF attacked yesterday in Syria. It looks like any second something is about to erupt, and I heard somebody saying, I didn't look into it, that we're not going to have elections by September. By then we'll have Gog Magog, the third World War, and the Russians are moving here, the Americans are moving that, the Americans are already moving aircraft carriers, stealth bombers. I mean, I know it looks like a broken record, but any second it looks like something's going down. And if you're living in a cloud that everything's fine, that's really living on a cloud. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, Im Yisrael osim tshuva miyad negalim. If we do tshuva, right away we get redeemed. Who needs a headache? So the whole point is each and every one of us has to look in my own turf. How do I do tshuva? I can't count on anything. I have to count on my own tshuva. B'ezrat Hashem, if we do tshuva, then right away we get redeemed. And my tshuva, I have to look in my own actions. Not to slander, not to lie, not to cheat, to follow what the Torah says, not to add on the Torah, not to remove. I have to do tshuva. You will have to take to consideration that maybe because of you today, we're going to merit the Geula. Maybe if you do a certain act today, I'm not talking about anybody else. Maybe because you pray today, or you say Birkat Hamazon, or you, pray with a minyan, whatever it is. You have to have in mind, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one who's going to do this little act, and we get the redemption, because we don't know what will make the difference. So I like looking at history, and not learning history, is learning from what happened in the past to the future. So that's the smart way of looking in the Torah, not to use it as a history book, rather to use it as a reference what we need to learn from. If you're looking back and learning from the history, you're not doing anything. You have to take what happened and apply it into the future. B'ezrat Hashem, if we do that, then I can guarantee to you that we will be the ones who are walking into Eretz Yisrael, even though we're physically here already. But nevertheless, we don't have Eretz Yisrael. We maybe are inhabiting it right now, but we need to get Eretz Yisrael, we need to build Beit HaMikdash. And B'ezrat Hashem, what are we reading in this parasha? Red heifer. That's one of the first things we're going to see when Mashiach comes, is the red heifer. We're all smeared with impurity of tumat met, of the worst impurity of death. And one of the first things we're going to have, they're going to slaughter the red heifer, make the water, sprinkle us, we'll go to the mikveh. No anger, no hate, no wars, no diseases. So yalla, we gotta move the system. B'ezrat Hashem, b'emet, we should marry to do tshuva. And exactly how the Zohar promises, Im osim tshuva miyad negalim. If we do tshuva right away, we get redeemed. Now, start working.